Get me the usual, sweetheart. And while you're at it, what stock should I invest in next? Dominic Salvati laughed, his custom Italian suit worth more than her annual salary, as his entourage of 5 men erupted in synchronized laughter. The Providence restaurant fell silent as all eyes darted between the notorious 30-year-old crime boss and the simple waitress caught in his impromptu game. Audrey Bennett tucked a strand of chestnut hair behind her ear, her expression unreadable, as she carefully placed down his whiskey. Neat. I'd liquidate your position in Mercer Pharmaceuticals immediately, Mr. Salvati. Their CEO just resigned amid fraud allegations that haven't hit the press yet, she replied softly, her eyes never leaving his. The laughter died instantly, replaced by a charged silence as Dominic's smirk froze on his handsome face. His calculating eyes narrowed, suddenly reassessing the 25-year-old woman standing before him with new interest, as his security detail exchanged uncomfortable glances. How exactly would a waitress at Providence Harbor know about executive movements at Mercer before my very expensive financial advisors? He asked, voice dangerously soft as he leaned forward, the candlelight accentuating the sharp angles of his face. The restaurant's exclusive atmosphere seemed to tighten around them like a closing fist. Audrey's steady gaze didn't waver despite her racing heart. The same way I know your Cayman Holdings lost 18% last quarter while your competitors gained. I pay attention, she answered calmly, revealing knowledge no ordinary server should possess. Dominic's men tensed, hands instinctively moving toward concealed weapons as their boss raised a single finger to halt them. The simple gesture demonstrated his absolute control, the power to command lethal force with the slightest movement. Cancel my dinner plans, he announced, dismissing his confused associates with a subtle nod, while his intense gaze remained fixed on Audrey. It seems I need a private financial consultation with Ms. He paused, awaiting her full name with an expectant arch of his eyebrow. She hesitated only momentarily before straightening her shoulders. Bennett. Audrey Bennett, she replied, knowing that revealing her identity to a man like Dominic Salvati might be the most dangerous decision she'd ever made, yet somehow unable to walk away. The maitre d' nervously escorted them to a secluded corner table overlooking the twinkling Providence skyline, anxiety evident in his hurried movements. The restaurant staff exchanged worried glances as the city's most feared man sat across from their colleague with undisguised fascination. So, Audrey Bennett, Dominic said her name slowly, testing how it felt on his tongue as he studied her with the intensity of a predator. Tell me how a woman with your obvious financial acumen is serving overpriced steaks to men who don't deserve your insights. She arranged the silverware precisely, a nervous habit betraying her outward calm. Sometimes invisibility is an advantage, Mr. Salvati. People reveal truths to servers they'd never share with their business partners, she explained, finally meeting his gaze with quiet confidence. Dominic's laugh was genuine this time, warm and surprisingly melodic without his entourage present. You've been analyzing the financial conversations at these tables, haven't you? He realized, genuine admiration replacing his initial amusement as he leaned closer. Everyone has talents they hide from the world, Audrey replied enigmatically, something flickering behind her eyes that hinted at deeper secrets. Even the most powerful men in Providence might be surprised by what exists beneath the surface of ordinary lives. Dominic swirled his whiskey thoughtfully, studying how the restaurant lights caught in her intelligent eyes. I'm not a man who believes in coincidences, Ms. Bennett. Our paths crossing tonight feels distinctly like fate, he confessed, surprising himself with the unexpected vulnerability. 3 weeks after their chance encounter, Audrey entered the unmarked office building on the outskirts of the city, clutching her portfolio of financial analyses. The security guards nodded respectfully as she passed, a stark contrast to how they'd regarded her suspiciously during her first visit to Dominic's legitimate business headquarters. Your recommendation saved us nearly $12 million, Dominic stated without preamble as she entered his minimalist office, his back to her as he gazed out over the Providence skyline. My family's consigliere thinks you're either a financial genius or setting an elaborate trap. Audrey carefully arranged her latest projections on his desk, maintaining professional distance despite the electric tension that seemed to fill any room they shared. The Reynolds Group acquisition would extend your shipping routes into regulated markets without drawing federal attention, she explained, focusing on business despite her racing pulse. Dominic turned, his tailored suit emphasizing the powerful physique beneath, as he studied her with that now familiar intensity. You continue to surprise me. Most financial advisors recommend flashy tech stocks, not strategic logistics acquisitions that complement existing operations, he observed, moving closer. I'm not most financial advisors, Audrey replied simply, forcing herself to meet his gaze despite how his proximity affected her concentration. And I suspect you're not really interested in cryptocurrency speculation, despite what your younger captains are pushing for. Dominic smiled, the expression transforming his usually guarded features into something dangerously appealing. You see through the layers of my organization remarkably clearly for an outsider, he noted, voice lowered as he rounded the desk to stand beside her. What started as financial consultation had evolved into something far more complex and dangerous as the lines between professional and personal blurred with each meeting. Audrey found herself drawn not just to his business acumen, but to the man behind the fearsome reputation, the self-made strategist who built an empire from nothing. Your family history in Providence goes back 5 generations, Audrey observed, noting the vintage photographs displayed discreetly on his credenza. Yet you've diversified from traditional operations into legitimate businesses faster than any of your predecessors. Dominic's expression tightened momentarily, surprised by her knowledge of his family legacy. Most people are too terrified to research my background, he remarked, studying her with renewed curiosity as he considered what other information she might have uncovered. Understanding your past helps me predict your future moves, she explained, suddenly aware of how dangerous this conversation had become. The same way I analyze market patterns to anticipate shifts before they happen. His hand brushed hers as he reached for the financial reports, the brief contact sending an unexpected current between them. And what future do you predict for me, Audrey Bennett? He asked, voice uncharacteristically soft, as their eyes locked in silent acknowledgement of growing attraction. That depends entirely on what you want, Mr. Salvati, she answered carefully, conscious of the delicate balance between them. Your empire stands at a crossroads between legitimacy and tradition. The path you choose determines everything. The tension between them thickened, as Dominic moved imperceptibly closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. And if what I want has nothing to do with business? He questioned, the dangerous implication hanging in the air between them like a live wire. Audrey stepped back, maintaining professional distance despite the pull between them. Then I would remind you that mixing business with pleasure rarely ends well for either party, she cautioned, though her racing heart betrayed her composed exterior. Dominic studied her for a long moment before nodding slowly, respect evident in his expression. Join me for dinner tonight. Not as my financial advisor, but as my guest, he proposed, his invitation hanging between them like a bridge between their separate worlds. The exclusive rooftop restaurant overlooked all of Providence, its private dining area secured by Dominic's men who maintained discreet positions throughout the establishment. Audrey felt distinctly out of place in her simple black dress, as the maître d' guided her toward the candlelit table where Dominic awaited. You look beautiful, Dominic stated simply as he rose to greet her, genuine appreciation replacing his usual calculating gaze. Though you seem uncomfortable, is it the restaurant or the company that concerns you? He asked with unexpected perceptiveness. Audrey accepted the chair he offered, arranging her napkin carefully to buy precious seconds of composure. Both, if I'm being honest. This world of wealth and power operates by different rules than the one I'm accustomed to, she admitted with characteristic directness. Dominic's smile held surprising warmth as he selected a vintage wine without consulting the sommelier. Yet you navigate financial markets with extraordinary skill, systems designed by and for the wealthy, he observed, studying her with open curiosity over candlelight. Numbers follow universal laws. They don't care about social status or family connections, she explained, accepting the wine he offered. People are far more unpredictable and dangerous than market fluctuations. Dominic leaned forward, their conversation suddenly feeling intensely private, despite the spectacular cityscape surrounding them. Is that how you see me, Audrey? As dangerous? He asked, vulnerability briefly visible beneath his controlled exterior. Everyone in Providence knows Dominic Salvati is dangerous, she answered carefully, meeting his gaze directly. What they don't know is whether you're dangerous in ways that threaten their safety or in ways that might protect it. His expression shifted, surprise evident that she'd recognized the duality of his position. My family has controlled this city for generations. Protection and threat are often the same action viewed from different perspectives, he acknowledged, revealing more of himself than intended. The difference matters, Audrey insisted quietly, her moral clarity both challenging and intriguing him. Legacy businesses built on fear eventually collapse, while those built on mutual benefit endure. History proves this consistently. Dominic studied her thoughtfully, twirling his wine glass between powerful fingers. You speak of transformation as though it were simple. My family's history is complex and blood-soaked, he confessed, the burden of inheritance evident in his troubled expression. Nothing worthwhile is simple, Audrey replied, surprising herself with her boldness. But every empire reaches a moment when it must evolve or perish. I believe Providence is witnessing your moment of decision. Their conversation flowed with unexpected ease as dinner progressed, moving from business strategy to personal philosophies, without the pretense that had marked their earlier interactions. Dominic found himself revealing childhood memories he'd shared with no one, drawn to her genuine interest and insightful observations. My grandfather taught me to fight before I could properly read, he recounted, watching how Audrey listened without judgment. He believed strength was the only language our enemies understood. It took years to recognize the limitations of that worldview. Audrey considered this revelation carefully, seeing beyond the ruthless reputation to the man shaped by generational expectations. Yet you invested in education beyond what your position required, graduated top of your class despite your family responsibilities, she noted. Dominic's expression registered surprise once again. You've researched me thoroughly, he observed, uncertain whether to be impressed or concerned by her knowledge. Most people are too intimidated to look beneath the surface. Research is my specialty. Understanding the financial patterns of influential figures gives me an edge, Audrey admitted, sipping her wine to steady her nerves. Though I never expected to discuss my findings directly with the subject of my analysis. Dominic leaned back, a newfound appreciation in his gaze. Most who investigate me have ulterior motives, federal agents, rival families, ambitious prosecutors. Yet you sought knowledge without agenda, he observed, finding this quality strangely refreshing. Their evening extended far beyond dinner, conversation flowing effortlessly as they moved to the terrace overlooking the glittering cityscape. Providence stretched before them like a map of possibilities, its lights twinkling with promises neither had expected to consider. My lieutenant, Paul, believes you're too great a risk, Dominic confessed suddenly, his candor surprising both of them. He thinks your knowledge makes you dangerous, that your influence over me is problematic for our operations. Audrey tensed, immediately understanding the implied threat behind his words. And what do you think, Dominic? She asked, using his first name deliberately as she met his gaze with quiet courage despite her racing heart. Something shifted in his expression, a softening around eyes that had witnessed too much violence. I think you see possibilities in me and my businesses that I'd stopped believing existed, he answered, the unexpected vulnerability in his voice hanging between them. The following weeks saw Audrey increasingly drawn into Dominic's world, consulting on legitimate business expansions while carefully avoiding questions about his family's traditional operations. Their professional relationship provided cover for deepening personal connection as Providence whispered speculations about the crime boss's mysterious new advisor. Paul Gallo, Dominic's childhood friend and right-hand man, watched their growing closeness with undisguised suspicion. His loyalty to family traditions made Audrey's influence a perceived threat to everything they'd built together over 2 decades of brotherhood and blood. She's changing you, Dom. Paul confronted him in the private back room of their social club, surrounded by decades of family history mounted on wood-paneled walls. The captains are questioning your commitment to our heritage. Your grandfather would never allow an outsider such influence. Dominic's expression hardened, the dangerous edge returning to his voice. My grandfather died in prison because he refused to evolve with changing times, he replied coldly, the implicit warning clear as tension thickened between the lifelong friends. Late-night strategy sessions in Dominic's downtown penthouse blurred professional boundaries as Audrey helped restructure his shipping operations to maximize legitimate profits. Their shoulders brushed as they pored over spreadsheets, each touch increasing the electric awareness between them. These import routes through Providence Harbor could triple your legal revenue streams while minimizing exposure to customs investigations, Audrey explained, pointing to shipping lanes highlighted on digital maps. The Reynolds acquisition provides perfect cover for consolidating operations. Dominic studied her animated expression, increasingly captivated by her brilliant mind, rather than just her quiet beauty. You're describing complete transformation of a century-old organization without dismantling its core structure, he realized, impressed by her strategic vision. Evolution, not revolution, she clarified, meeting his intense gaze across the table cluttered with financial projections. Preserving your family legacy, while redirecting its power toward sustainable, legitimate enterprises that benefit Providence rather than intimidate it. The first attempt on Audrey's life came without warning as she left her modest apartment one morning, the black sedan accelerating toward her with deadly intent. Only Dominic's foresight in assigning a security detail, without her knowledge, prevented tragedy as his men intercepted the threat. This wasn't random, Dominic stated grimly in his office, as doctors attended to Audrey's minor injuries, his controlled rage visible only in the whiteness of his knuckles. Someone within our organization sees your influence as threat enough to warrant elimination. Audrey's hands trembled slightly despite her efforts to appear calm. Your transition toward legitimate business threatens those who profit from traditional operations, she observed, connecting the attempt on her life to the larger power shifts she had helped initiate. The financial crisis struck simultaneously with the internal threat. Federal authorities froze several key accounts based on anonymous tips about money laundering, effectively paralyzing Dominic's cash flow. The coordinated attack suggested insider knowledge of both financial structures and security protocols. We've lost access to 40% of our operating capital, Dominic's accountant reported nervously, as emergency meetings continued through the night. Without those funds, we can't close the Reynolds deal, and our legitimate expansion collapses. Audrey studied the financial reports spread across the conference table, her analytical mind searching for patterns amid chaos. The timing is too perfect. Someone wanted to create maximum vulnerability, just as the Reynolds acquisition deadline approaches, she concluded. Paul entered with 2 senior captains, tension evident in their rigid postures as accusatory glances fell on Audrey. Our sources in federal banking confirm the tips came from someone with intimate knowledge of our financial structure, he reported, implication clear in his tone. If you're suggesting Ms. Bennett orchestrated this crisis, you're mistaking our greatest asset for an enemy, Dominic responded with dangerous quiet, his protective stance beside Audrey, making his position unmistakable to the assembled leadership. The room fell silent, as decades of hierarchy and protocol collided with Dominic's evident trust in an outsider. Generations of Salvati business had been conducted exclusively within blood relationships and childhood bonds. Audrey's presence represented unprecedented change. I need everyone out except Ms. Bennett, Dominic ordered, his tone brooking no argument as his captains exchanged concerned glances, before reluctantly filing from the room. Paul, secure our secondary accounts before they're compromised as well. When the door closed behind them, Dominic's carefully maintained facade cracked slightly, revealing genuine concern beneath his controlled exterior. I've exposed you to dangers you never should have encountered, he admitted, regret evident in his voice. Audrey straightened, determination replacing fear, as her brilliant mind formulated counter-strategies. The Reynolds acquisition can still proceed if we restructure through your offshore holdings in Singapore. They're sufficiently distanced from flagged accounts, she proposed. Dominic studied her with newfound respect. Where his most seasoned advisors saw catastrophe, she identified opportunity. You're suggesting we use this crisis to accelerate our legitimate transition rather than retreat to traditional operations, he realized. Precisely. We convert frozen assets into legal collateral using the Japanese investment group as intermediary, she explained, quickly sketching the complex financial structure. By the time federal investigators follow the trail, everything will be legitimately documented. Their strategy session extended into dawn, the crisis forcing unprecedented closeness as they worked together against unseen enemies. Dominic found himself increasingly drawn to her resilience as much as her brilliance. She faced threats with quiet courage that matched his own. Why risk your life to help transform a criminal empire? Dominic asked softly as morning light filtered through blinds, the question that had haunted him since her first unexpected financial insight at the restaurant finally voiced aloud. Audrey paused, the question striking at truths she'd carefully guarded. My father was a brilliant financial advisor who refused to launder money for clients despite threats, she revealed, vulnerability evident in her usually composed expression. He lost everything, reputation, career, eventually his life, because he stood against powerful men who demanded he compromise his principles, she continued, years of carefully hidden pain finally surfacing. I promised myself I'd understand their world well enough to change it. Dominic absorbed this revelation, suddenly understanding the deeper motivations behind her exceptional financial insights. You've been studying criminal financial structures not just for professional advantage, but to transform them from within, he realized. One organization at a time, Audrey acknowledged, meeting his gaze directly. I never expected to find someone like you, a leader actually willing to consider evolution beyond violence and intimidation. Dominic moved closer, the professional distance between them finally collapsing under the weight of shared purpose and growing connection. And I never expected someone who could see beyond my reputation to the possibilities beneath, he admitted quietly. The crisis brought them together in unexpected ways as they worked tirelessly to outmaneuver both federal investigators and internal opposition. Late nights reviewing financial structures evolved into conversations about childhood dreams and unrealized aspirations as walls between them gradually crumbled. I wanted to be an architect as a child, Dominic confessed one night, as they paused for coffee amid sprawling paperwork. I designed entire cities in my notebooks until my father caught me. Said Salvati men build empires, not buildings. Audrey smiled, imagining the serious-eyed boy with architectural dreams before family legacy claimed him. Perhaps that explains your strategic thinking. You see interconnected systems where others see only individual transactions, she observed insightfully. My mother encouraged those drawings until my father discovered them, Dominic continued, revealing layers of his past rarely shared with anyone. She secretly preserved my sketchbooks. I found them among her possessions after she passed, hidden where my father would never look. The revelation of this tender connection to his mother softened Audrey's perception of the formidable man before her. Behind the calculated business decisions and dangerous reputation existed a son who had honored his mother's protection of his creative spirit, preserving a piece of himself despite his father's rigid expectations. The waterfront development project, Audrey realized suddenly, connecting his architectural passion to his unexpected enthusiasm for the harbor renovation. That's why you've been so personally invested in the design elements rather than just the financial returns. You're finally building your city. Their hands brushed as they reached simultaneously for financial projections, the brief contact sending electric awareness through both of them. The professional pretense between them had worn increasingly thin as crisis forced intimacy and shared purpose revealed deeper connection. We should review Audrey began, her voice faltering as Dominic gently captured her hand, preventing her retreat to the safety of business discussion. The tension between them had built over weeks of collaboration, neither willing to acknowledge its intensity. I've faced gunfire with less fear than I feel right now, Dominic admitted quietly, his usually confident expression replaced by rare vulnerability. Every instinct warns that caring for you endangers everything, yet I can't remember why my empire mattered before you entered it. Audrey's careful composure finally cracked as she allowed herself to acknowledge the truth. I came to understand your world, perhaps to change it. I never expected you would change mine, she confessed, her professional detachment finally surrendering to deeper truth. The kiss that followed was inevitable, tender at first, then deepening with weeks of restrained emotion as professional boundaries dissolved completely. The dangerous chemistry between them transformed from background tension to acknowledged reality as Dominic pulled her closer. My entire organization would consider this a catastrophic breach of protocol, Dominic murmured against her lips, his hands threading gently through her hair as though she were precious rather than forbidden. Salvati men never expose their hearts to potential leverage. Audrey pulled back slightly, framing his face between her hands with newfound boldness. Perhaps that's exactly why the Salvati Empire needs transformation. Strength without connection isn't power, it's isolation, she challenged, her insight striking at generations of family doctrine. Their newfound personal connection had barely taken root when disaster struck at the heart of Dominic's organization. Financial records mysteriously disappeared from secure servers, wiping out months of careful restructuring work and compromising the Reynolds acquisition just days before closing. This wasn't a system failure. Someone deliberately targeted our transition plans, Dominic concluded grimly as his tech team reported the extent of the sabotage. Every digital trace of legitimate restructuring has been systematically erased from our secure network. Audrey's analytical mind immediately connected the previous attack with this new sabotage. Whoever is behind this doesn't just want to stop your legitimate expansion. They're trying to force you back to traditional operations by eliminating alternatives, she observed. The betrayal crystallized during an emergency meeting of Dominic's inner circle when Paul arrived conspicuously late, his explanation about checking security protocols contradicted by the technical team's access logs. His subtle smirk when viewing the financial devastation confirmed Audrey's suspicions. Your father and grandfather built this organization on loyalty and tradition, Paul declared during the tense meeting, eyes challenging as he addressed Dominic. Now you'd dismantle their legacy based on advice from an outsider, with mysterious motives and convenient solutions. Dominic's expression betrayed nothing as decades of friendship collided with mounting evidence of treachery. Loyalty includes respecting the leader's vision for our future, not sabotaging it because it differs from the past, he responded with dangerous calm. The assembled captains shifted uncomfortably. Loyalty divided between traditional operations they understood and the promising yet uncertain future Dominic proposed. Their silent assessment weighed generations of violent doctrine against the innovative prosperity his new direction offered their families and children. Your grandfather eliminated 3 captains who questioned his judgment, Paul reminded him, invoking the founder's ruthless legacy as justification. Now you allow questioning not just from within our ranks, but from someone who was serving us drinks mere months ago. Around the table, several older members nodded in agreement, while younger captains, those with children they hoped might have legitimate futures, exchanged thoughtful glances. The family stood at generational crossroads, with Paul representing comfortable brutality of the past, and Dominic the challenging evolution toward legitimate power. Later that evening, while reviewing backup files in Dominic's private office, Audrey discovered the financial manipulation that revealed the full extent of Paul's betrayal. Hidden accounts traced to offshore entities showed systematic embezzlement spanning years. Paul had been siphoning family resources while maintaining the appearance of absolute loyalty. He's been stealing from you for at least 7 years, Audrey explained quietly, showing Dominic the evidence on her laptop. The transition to legitimate business would have eventually exposed his scheme during standard compliance audits. Dominic's expression darkened as he processed the betrayal of his childhood friend and most trusted lieutenant. So he orchestrated both the federal investigation and the internal sabotage to protect himself while discrediting you, he concluded, controlled rage evident in his voice. The attempt on my life makes sense now. I was getting too close to financial records that would expose his theft, Audrey realized, the pieces finally falling into place. He needed to eliminate me before I discovered the discrepancies. As they strategized their response late into the night, Dominic received an urgent call. Paul had taken independent action, assembling several captains loyal to traditional operations for an unauthorized gathering at the family's historic social club. The message was clear: challenge to leadership. He's making his move now, believing our financial infrastructure is too damaged for recovery, Dominic assessed, his tactical mind already formulating countermeasures. He'll present himself as the guardian of tradition against my corrupting modern vision. Audrey gripped Dominic's arm before he could depart to confront the rebellion. There's something else you need to see first, she insisted, revealing the final piece of evidence, documents showing Paul's secret meetings with rival families, positioning himself to seize control of Salvati territory. The revelation of this ultimate betrayal transformed Dominic's controlled anger to lethal resolve. Stay here with my security detail, he instructed Audrey, his voice taking on the cold edge she had rarely witnessed. This ends tonight, but I won't risk your safety. I'm coming with you, Audrey countered with unexpected firmness, gathering the financial evidence into a secure portfolio. Your captains need to see the complete truth from the person who uncovered it. Half-truths will only breed future doubts about your leadership. The historic Salvati Social Club stood as testament to generations of family power and providence, its wood-paneled walls lined with photographs of stern-faced patriarchs who had ruled the city through prohibition, depression, and into modern prosperity. Tonight, those silent observers would witness unprecedented challenge to their legacy. Dominic entered with Audrey at his side, the assembled captains falling silent as the unexpected pair appeared in the doorway. Paul's expression shifted from confident authority to momentary uncertainty at the calm resolve radiating from his childhood friend and former boss. I see emergency protocol has been abandoned along with other traditions, Dominic observed coldly, scanning the room to identify which captains had aligned with the rebellion. Family business being conducted without the family head present, my father would consider that treason. Paul recovered quickly, gesturing dramatically toward Audrey. You bring an outsider into our most sacred space while accusing others of disrespect? He challenged, playing to the traditionalists among the captains. Your judgment has been compromised by this woman. My judgment has been clarified by this woman, Dominic corrected, his voice deadly quiet as he placed a hand protectively at the small of Audrey's back. She discovered what loyal eyes refused to see: betrayal from the man I considered brother. The atmosphere shifted perceptibly as Audrey opened her portfolio, methodically displaying financial records on the antique conference table. 7 years of systematic theft from Salvati family accounts, she explained with professional detachment. Over $22 million diverted to personal holdings. Paul's face drained of color as captains moved forward to examine the evidence, his carefully constructed rebellion crumbling under the weight of financial proof. These are fabricated. She's manipulating financial data to turn you against me, he attempted desperately. The offshore accounts are registered to your mother's maiden name, Audrey continued calmly, presenting banking documents bearing Paul's signature. The same signature appears on agreements with the Cardona family to divide Salvati territory once leadership was compromised. Murmurs of outrage rippled through the assembled captains as the extent of betrayal became clear. Theft was unfortunate, but understandable. Alliance with rivals unforgivable. The room's loyalty shifted palpably as decades of family doctrine about absolute loyalty reasserted itself. You would believe this outsider over me. 25 years of brotherhood thrown away for spreadsheets and a pretty face, Paul snarled, desperation replacing calculation as he reached beneath his jacket with deadly intent. The movement triggered immediate response from Dominic's security detail. What followed happened with such practiced efficiency that Audrey barely registered the sequence of events. Guards disarming Paul, captains stepping back in silent acknowledgement of justified intervention, Dominic maintaining absolute composure throughout the controlled violence that secured his authority. Take him to the warehouse, Dominic instructed his security chief with chilling finality, the traditional euphemism for final justice understood by everyone present. His expression remained impassive as his oldest friend was removed from the room, tradition demanding decisive response to betrayal. Audrey touched his arm gently, her voice pitched for his ears alone. There's another option. Federal evidence on financial crimes would remove him permanently without blood on your hands, she suggested quietly. The first true demonstration of your new direction. Surprise flickered across Dominic's features, tradition and transformation warring within him as the assembled captains awaited his decision. Generations of Salvati doctrine demanded blood payment for betrayal, yet the future he envisioned required different solutions. His eyes met Audrey's across the tension-filled room, finding in her steady gaze the courage to break cycles of violence that had defined his family for generations. This single decision would redefine the Salvati legacy more profoundly than any business acquisition or territorial expansion ever could. The younger captains watched with particular intensity, their loyalty not yet calcified by decades of tradition, their futures directly shaped by whether Dominic chose blood or justice tonight. These men represented the next generation that would either perpetuate violence or pioneer legitimate power under his reformed leadership. Prepare the financial evidence for federal authorities, Dominic announced after long consideration, his decision sending shocked whispers through the room. Paul Gallo will serve his sentence through legal channels. The Salvati family is evolving beyond personal vengeance. The captains exchanged uncertain glances, generations of violent tradition challenged by their leader's unprecedented restraint. The silence stretched uncomfortably until the oldest captain, Giuseppe, stepped forward with unexpected support for the modern approach. Your grandfather ruled through fear, your father through force. Perhaps it's time to discover what ruling through respect might accomplish, the aging consigliere observed, his endorsement carrying the weight of 5 decades in family service. The old ways brought us federal attention and prison sentences. Dominic addressed the assembled leadership with newfound clarity of purpose, Audrey standing proudly at his side. Our family faces a choice between evolution and extinction. Federal pressure, changing markets, and digital oversight make our traditional methods increasingly obsolete. 6 months after Paul's betrayal, the Salvati organization had undergone transformation that would have seemed impossible before Audrey's influence. Legitimate businesses flourished as traditional operations were systematically converted to legal enterprises, profits increasing despite, or perhaps because of, the dramatic shift in methodology. The Reynolds acquisition increased our shipping revenue by 62% in the first quarter alone, Audrey reported during the executive meeting, now officially serving as Chief Financial Officer for Salvati Enterprises. Our legitimate portfolio now generates 87% of total revenue. The Providence business community watched in fascination as Dominic Salvati emerged from shadows into respectability, his sharp business acumen earning reluctant admiration from former detractors. Local papers that once reported on suspected criminal activities now covered philanthropic initiatives and economic development projects. Former rivals approached with partnership proposals rather than threats, recognizing the strategic advantage of alliance with Salvati's modernized operation. The transition created a blueprint for other families across the Northeast, who faced similar pressures from federal authorities and changing economic landscapes. Audrey's innovative financial structures became case studies in exclusive business schools, though her identity remained carefully protected from public scrutiny. Her background as a waitress who revolutionized a criminal empire remained their precious secret, a reminder that true power often emerges from unexpected sources. Your proposal for revitalizing the Harbor District has been approved unanimously by the City Council, Dominic informed Audrey as they reviewed architectural plans in his office. They're calling it the most significant economic development initiative in Providence history. Audrey smiled, satisfaction evident as her vision for transformation extended beyond financial structures to community impact. From controlling the waterfront through intimidation to rebuilding it through investment, your grandfather wouldn't recognize his empire, she observed. He wouldn't understand it, Dominic agreed, studying the architectural renderings with appreciation. But I believe he would respect the results. Greater prosperity, security, and legacy than traditional methods ever achieved, he added, acknowledging her influence without words. The Salvati Social Club had been renovated into a legitimate business club, where Providence's entrepreneurs gathered for networking and collaboration. Tonight, it hosted a charity gala, benefiting educational initiatives in the city's underserved neighborhoods, symbolizing the organization's dramatic evolution. The mayor is actually attending a Salvati event, Dominic noted with wry amusement as they watched Providence's political elite mingling with his reformed organization. 2 years ago, he wouldn't take my calls. Now he's asking for campaign contributions. Audrey wore emerald silk that complemented her eyes as she moved confidently through the gathering, her financial brilliance now publicly acknowledged and celebrated. Banking executives who once knew her only as a quiet waitress now sought her investment insights with eager deference. They have no idea that their generous donations tonight are flowing back into communities they exploited for decades, she whispered to Dominic with subtle satisfaction. Poetic justice doesn't always require courtrooms or violence. Dominic watched her with undisguised admiration, still sometimes amazed by how thoroughly she had transformed both his organization and himself. The hardened crime boss had evolved into a respected business leader, without sacrificing the core strength that defined him. My captains report that criminal activity in our districts has decreased 60% since we established legitimate employment programs, Dominic informed her quietly. Turns out people prefer honest work when it actually feeds their families. As the evening progressed, Dominic guided Audrey to the renovated rooftop terrace where they had shared their first personal dinner months earlier. Providence stretched before them, its landscape now dotted with Salvati-funded community developments and legitimate enterprises. I asked you here because this view represents something important, Dominic explained, gesturing toward the transformed cityscape. From this vantage point, you can see every project you inspired, tangible proof that one person's vision can change generations of destructive patterns. Audrey's eyes widened as Dominic reached into his pocket, producing a small velvet box that gleamed in the moonlight. Audrey Bennett, you walked into my restaurant prepared to serve dinner, and instead served wisdom that transformed an empire, he began, uncharacteristic emotion evident in his voice. You saw possibility where others saw only darkness, showed strength where others showed fear, and offered partnership where others demanded submission, Dominic continued, opening the box to reveal an emerald ring that matched her eyes. Will you continue our journey together, as my wife? Thank you all for following this story. If you're enjoying it, write in the comments where you're watching this story from. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the video, because your support is important for me to continue here.